Hello everybody, my name's Pete Colby. I run a company called Pragmatism, you'll never guess. And Liz, who runs the Ninjas, if I keep stopping, it's because I'm admitting people from the waiting room, asked me to do a talk with this great week, which has been really good so far. Some great presentations from Chris, Tanya, Nikki, and Melanie so far. And the conversation I'm going to talk about is what I believe is the lost art of conversation. I think we've lost something in actually talking to people, and we spend far too much time in formal grievances and even disciplinaries. So that's the subject. But before I start with the subject, and I know she's on, so I'm going to embarrass her again. So Liz, for those of you who don't know her, Liz Henson, this is the lady, there you go, Liz, I've called you a lady, who runs HR Ninjas. And as we all know, it's a fantastic group, and she's just messaging to say stop right now, so I'll continue. But Liz is great, and it's a great group, and she's put so much effort into this. So thank you very much, Liz, it's really appreciated. So what do I want to talk about today? I want to talk about me. I think it's only right that I just give you a little bit of my background. Just going to let some more into from the waiting room. Sorry. So yeah, I'll talk a little bit about me. I want to talk about formal grievances. I've got a firm belief that grievances are failures. So what I'm going to do now with the waiting room is leave them for a while, and then I'll enter them all at once. They're a bit of a pain, these waiting rooms. So yeah, I've got a firm belief that formal grievances are actually a failure, and I'll come on to why I think that. I want to talk root cause. Anybody who knows me knows I bang on about root cause all the time, and some of the root causes I see in workplace disputes and issues. And then moving on to disciplinaries, I want to talk about the why and not the what. So that's the agenda. Let me let the latecomers in from the waiting room. So hello to everybody that's joined. This is the agenda. If you put me on speaker view, then you'll view this presentation much more clearly. So me, I won't dwell on me too much, but this is the most important, or these are the two most important people in my life. And Liz, my wife, and Millie, my daughter, who's just turned 9. And I put them up first because they are first. And I just think, when we get entrenched in all these issues in work, sometimes we lose perspective on the most important things, which is usually family and friends and people that we love. Strange picture, but I'm animal mad. So I rescue chickens, of all things. That's the same chicken, by the way. That's how they come, and that's how they end up. I'm a Yorkshireman. I've kept ferrets. I keep dogs. These are my current dogs. I've kept everything animal-wise that you can probably keep: rats, mice, ferrets, birds, everything, fish, etc. So I am a bit animal mad. I love travel. This is me. You can see it's probably more than a couple of years ago. Me traveling in India many years ago. Some people have said I look like Owen Wilson in this photo, which is far better than what most people say, which is Shaggy off Scooby-Doo, which is not so great. So let's say I look like Owen Wilson at that time. You'll recognise this world famous football emblem, which is Doncaster Rovers. So I'm from Doncaster originally. I'm just going to let more in from the waiting room. This is where I should have had a second host. So the boring bit, I've got a master's degree in HR. I'm a fellow of the CIPD, but more importantly and relevant to what I do now, CMC is the Civil Mediation Council. So I'm governed by the Civil Mediation Council in the mediation work that I do. And I do civil and commercial mediation. So disputes over boundary fences, landlord, tenant, things like that, contractual disputes, but more relevant to today is workplace mediation. And Tanya gave an excellent presentation yesterday on mediation. And what I would add to that is that the difference between these two is really the relationships. because in a commercial contract dispute, if you bought a kitchen off somebody and you're taking them to court, the long-term relationship is irrelevant. You'll probably never buy a kitchen off them again. They'll never want you as a customer again. In workplace mediation, the relationship is absolutely key, obviously. So it does, I personally, I'm sure Tanya would agree, but workplace mediation I find is a lot more difficult because of that relationship element, which makes it a really good outcome as well. So that's me personally, but what I'm going to do now is just whiz you through my career, and there's a reason for that, which I'll explain at the end. But from me leaving school at 16 to setting up pragmatism, as most people do, I left school to make false teeth. So I was a trainee dental technician making false teeth, and that was my first experience of leadership. So I worked for a horrible boss. I was bullied as a 16-year-old in my first job. So if I did anything wrong, my boss used to physically thump me around the head. That was his way of managing me. So great experience as a 16-year-old. I then left there fairly quickly, as you can imagine. I then became a trainee accountant. I decided I wanted to be an accountant for some reason, studied accountancy, which was a 3-year course, did 2 years of that course. And, sorry, somebody's just coming the way to me. I did 2 years of that course, and it just wasn't me. I didn't quite get as excited as everybody else if a balance sheet balanced. Not that my balance sheets ever did balance, but it wasn't quite as exciting for me. I just didn't know what I wanted to do. So me and a friend were sat in a pub in Doncaster one day, didn't know what we wanted to do, so we just decided to go travelling. So travelled from when I was 19 to 21, year in Australia, 3 months in India, Southeast Asia, various places, which was obviously a great experience. Came back just before Christmas, got a job packing boxes in a warehouse. Thought I'd stay there for 2 months, stayed for 3 years, met my girlfriend, who became my first wife. This is my second wife and final wife, hopefully. And we bought a house. So we bought our first house, which was fantastic. But then 3 months after buying that house, they announced closure. So I was made redundant, and it was the most devastating thing that could have happened to me at the time. But here I had the opposite type of boss to I had there. This was a great guy, somebody I really respected, somebody who I'd been in trouble with a few times actually, but dealt with things in the right way. But he talked to me and said, Pete, you've probably got a little bit about you. You left school at 16, why don't you go to university? I said, well, I need to pay a mortgage. So that conversation led to me going to university in the day and working at night in a Tesco distribution place. Absolutely shattering, but obviously then increased the qualifications. I then became a recruitment consultant. So I knew I wanted to do something with people. A job came up for a recruitment consultant. It was a bit salesy for me, but my main client was British Steel, which became Chorus. And that's where I started my HR career, or personnel as it was at the time. And started, taking notes in grievances, taking notes in union meetings, etc. And really started to think then, why do we spend all this time writing notes and typing up notes and things? Could we not just have conversations? So I spent 8 years there. I made over 3,000 people redundant. I was known as the hatchet man there, but really started to form my career at British Steel. I then left there and joined Northern Foods in Nottingham, Port Farms in Nottingham. The HR director showed me an article in UK Food Manufacturing that described this site as the worst industrial relations environment in the UK food industry, which attracted me because I quite like to get involved in disputes, etc. And it really was quite bad. HR had panic buttons under the desk, massive grievance culture, which I'll talk about in a minute, strikes, all that good stuff. So a really interesting site. We changed that site culturally quite significantly. I'd always said to my boss that I wanted to do a proper job, meaning a supervisor on a line for a couple of weeks. And we merged two factories, a pork pie factory and a sausage roll factory. And he said to me one Friday, he said, you want to do a proper job, so do the bigger factory manager job for the two factories. And that's what I did. So I did that job for longer than I did the HR job. So I did this for about 4 years. So I managed the whole factory, all the operations, about 850 people, ultimately working for me through a team of 16 shift managers, 24/7 operation, difficult customers like Tesco, Sainsbury's, Marks and Spencer's, people like that. So about 2 million products a week was the output. So a very interesting learning curve. So we were then acquired by venture capitalists, and I joined this little company called Rolls-Royce. I joined there as a senior HR business partner, strategic business partner, I think it was called. So I looked after a division of Rolls-Royce globally, about 4,000 people and about $750 million turnover in that particular business. And then latterly, I looked after Derby, so HR for Derby, which is about 12,000 people, and I had a team of HR managers that worked for me. During that time, I bought another house, the one we live in now, which was quite a big investment and a big project. And you can see what tends to happen when Pete buys a house. I was then made redundant from Rolls-Royce, which is where I then decided to do something I'd been tempted to do for a while, which was set up my own company, which is Pragmatism. Why is it called Pragmatism? It's probably the word that I've used the most in my entire career. I'm a massive believer, sorry I keep dipping down, but people are joining. So I'm a massive believer in there's no such thing as an answer that's the same in every people situation. I very much see laws and policies as the minimum standard, but just one factor that we have to take into account when making pragmatic decisions that fit the individual and fit the business. So the name wasn't taken on Company's House, so that's why I called it Pragmatism. So, grievances. Tanya spoke very well about mediation yesterday, and for me, it's really, when you've got people in an entrenched position, so they're putting grievances in against each other and they're putting counter grievances in. Like Tanya said yesterday, the earlier you can deal with issues, the better, because once they're in grievances, they're entrenched, they've taken very, very strong positions. And what we do in mediation is really try to break that down and get more into their interests. And I don't mean flower arranging or playing squash, although that might be quite relevant, but their interest in that question that you always ask, what do you see as a solution? How could we resolve this? And actually talking about it in a less formal way than in the grievance procedure is 1,000, 1,000,000 times more effective in my view. So this is my really poor attempt at humour, in that I needed a prompt to do a poll, and there's a pole vaulter. So I'm a poll virgin, so I've never done a poll on Zoom. So there's 2 questions on here. You'll need to scroll down to answer both. If you wouldn't mind just filling it in live, and hopefully that's come through. And it's just rough. It's, please don't start adding up how many you've actually done and things. I'm hoping people can see that. I think you can. Oh yeah, somebody's filled it in. So I'm going to literally wait for you to do that, which would be great. So we've got 60 people on the call and 42 have filled it in so far. Brilliant. We're motoring. Just 10 more people. Please don't get your calculators out. Right. So we've got 50 out of the 60 have completed, so I'm going to end the poll. So hopefully you can see that on your screen. So I'm looking at it live the same as you. So the majority of people have been in between 6 to 25, which is quite a wide band, I appreciate. And it depends how long we've all been working in HR and who holds the record. So 12% of people have known formal processes go over 2 years. 18 months, 10%. So you can see those figures are pretty massive. I put over 2 years because I've known that, but it's fairly exceptional. I thought it was, but 12%. So that's 24 people out of the 50 people that filled it in have actually had these formal processes going over 2 years, which is amazing. So that was just a really useful thing for me to, first of all, see if I can use a poll on Zoom. But secondly, just to see, what experiences you guys have got as regards the amount of grievances, etc. So thank you for participating in that. So as I said earlier, I like this picture because it just shows the cultural element that can happen when people are in grievances and people are falling out. It just spreads literally like a box of matches. As I said earlier, I see grievances as a failure, formal grievances as a failure. And just to explain what I mean by that, I see it as it's either a failure of the organisation to resolve the issue informally, and I'll expand on that a little bit, or occasionally it's the failure of an individual to see any sense of rationale. And I'll give an example of when I've experienced that, which I find very frustrating, but people are people. But either way, and I would say it's at least 90%, 10%, probably a lot more over that way. I really do believe that we can sort these things out informally. So I mentioned Port Farms and a bit of a grievance culture. So that site, when I joined, had an average of 12 grievances per week. Now, some of those grievances would be next stage processes, etc. But I basically had a team of HR people who were processing grievances. That was their job. And the union played their part, because if the union office was between the factory and the HR office, if anybody walked by the union office, they had a vision panel in their door, an arm would come out, drag them in, ask them why they're going to HR. It might be that their pay was wrong, something like that. They fill a grievance form out for them, and there was just a pile of grievances to be processed. We took that site from 12 per week to 1 in 15 months, and I was absolutely mortified about the one. Just to give the context on what that was, it was a guy who was nearing retirement age who wanted to be made redundant. He wanted a golden handshake, or whatever you want to call it, because the company had done that for a few people. I told him we were not making him redundant, his job was there, etc. And we went through the whole thing. He said I don't know if he said it was his daughter or somebody he knew was an employment lawyer, clearly not a very good one, because they said he had a good case. I even offered in the informal process, like we do in settlements, to pay for him to see a solicitor of his own choice for an hour, pay £300, £400, £500, whatever it was, just to take advice on him taking us to court for making him keep his job. He didn't, so he went down a formal grievance, but I'll come on to how quickly that happened. So what we acquired in that facility was basically a 5-stage grievance process, because we had the informal stage, which nothing was really done at that stage, but then you had 4 stages in a grievance procedure. So what tended to happen was it went right up the tree, and then a decision was made. If it was resolved, it was resolved at the senior level. And that, for me, I talk a lot about good work and bad work. And for me, that is bad work. That is just wasted time in those processes. You may as well just go straight to that person and let them make all the decisions. But also, although they sorted that decision out, I still see that as failure, because if you could resolve it at that level in the organisation, I don't see any reason why you can't resolve it at that level. And you didn't need meetings, you didn't need meeting notes, you didn't need people typing things up, and all the good things that come with those formal processes. So what we did, we changed the procedure. We had 3 stages: informal, what most people have, a grievance and an appeal. That's it. But what I did, I put myself here. So I was the gatekeeper for anything going from there to there. And it, you know, I had to do a lot of coaching with some fairly inexperienced HR people, etc., and help them, but more so coaching the managers to realize it's their people, it's their accountability. It's not HR's job to sort out their people issues. It's actually HR's job to advise and guide and support, but they're accountable for their people. I didn't quite realize that. And it took a while to get there, but I was the gatekeeper. So I wouldn't I had to get involved if anything was going to go to there. And it was an agreement that I got with the trade unions, because they were just as keen to try to change this culture as well. So one got through there, the rest didn't. Now, what I would say is that didn't mean the issues went away. The issues were all there. The payroll queries, the toilets, the lockers, usually toilets, lockers, canteens, car parks are the most emotive things. Those issues were all there. But what we drove and what we did was we spent time. We spent time, but we spent good time, because it wasn't typing up notes. It was talking to people. It was trying to understand the issues. It was looking at root cause, which I'll come on to. And what I see that as, that's good work, because you're getting involved with people, you're engaging with them, you're understanding the challenges that they have. And loads of these 12 grievances a week were such, for them were big things, hence the grievance. But for us, were so easy and very, very, it was a little bit like employee engagement surveys, where we ask people and they give us 100 ideas, and loads of them are just what you call low-hanging fruit. So that was good work. The one that went through was incredibly efficient work. The notes for that were less than 2 A4 sides, because basically the person that held it at this level, and by the way, he didn't appeal, but the person that held it at this level just interviewed me, what have we done so far? And basically told him, well, I'm not going to do anything else, that's it. And he didn't appeal. So that became very efficient work at a management level, a senior management level. But in that whole process, it was probably, as I say, 2 sides of notes that were taken, instead of 5 or 4 meetings and loads of hours typing up notes for the HR team. And it turned their job into a much richer job. They were starting to coach managers, they were starting to develop culture, they were starting to develop the organization, and their job became a much better job. So just before I get onto any questions, just back to the mediation thing. For me, the 3 things that we're doing when we resolve issues as quickly as possible and relatively informally, without formal grievances, etc., is time. Like I mentioned, the amount of time people spend in these things is incredible, more than 2 years in some cases. Cost, and you know, sometimes people just think cost is if you get through to tribunals and you pay for lawyers. Absolutely not. The cost of that time, HR people, individuals off the job, managers off their job, but also people that are just not motivated and are not, they're hacked off, they're not productive. If you could really put pound signs on the bottom line as regards what grievances and things actually cost, I think a lot more financial people would really switch on. But by far the biggest thing is this, it's stress. So the amount of stress, so you imagine going through a grievance and a process for 2 years, and it's on your mind every day, and you're not sleeping, and it's affecting your family, and it's affecting those most important people in your life. It's incredible. And I see so many mental health issues and breakdowns and stress issues that could have been resolved on day 5 instead of year 2. It's just absolutely crazy. So that's me so far. So you're all on mute. So what I would suggest is, if you've got a question, now I know there's 20 odd chat things, I've not looked at those, but if you've got a question, do you want to just drop me a message? And then, oh yes, Tanya. Do you want to unmute yourself, Tanya? And oh, sorry, no, it's Sian saying yes to Tanya. So if anybody's got a question, just type in the chat yes, and then, oh, Emma's going. That's, thanks, Emma. Nobody's, okay. No, nobody's got any questions, right? Fine.
I'll just say something, Pete.
Oh!
Sorry, seeing there's nobody got any questions. So the use of employee engagement, completely invaluable. And as you commented on the, the cost and the time, but the stress element, when I'm doing mediations and I've met with plenty of very stressed, strung out, emotional people by the time it even gets to a mediation stage, and the amount of time off sick these people have had to have. And normally, I don't know about you people, I tend to be brought in when people have had their 6 month sick leave paid, finishes, so they've got no choice but to come back to work, and then they come into a mediation. So, the quicker you can deal with it, the most effective way you can deal with it, the better.
Yeah, God, absolutely, absolutely. And I just think that's why I call this the lost art of conversation, because I just don't think we build the confidence and we build the ability, and often HR functions are pretty guilty of this. We don't allow people just to have proper conversations. And, it's ironic that they're called employee engagement surveys and things, but we just don't seem to engage with people and just have the proper conversations. So yeah, absolutely, totally agree. It's there's so much stress. It's incredible. So I'm just seeing on the chat there's some things coming through. So Letitia, can you talk a bit more about the gatekeeping process? I assume that you're talking about the informal grievance process. It was just something that we put in as a bespoke thing. It was on the back of me banging the same drum as I've been banging today about why waste time in these formal meetings. And I just, the informal process there was, oh, you've got a grievance, can we sort it out informally? No. Oh, okay, put a formal grievance in. That was it. That was it. So the gatekeeping process I had was, I put my HR managers through some training, I suppose, but help them. They were all at different levels, but help them to change their perception on what they can do, because they didn't know what they were allowed to do really when it came to these things. And the gatekeeping thing was me being an escalation point almost within the informal process, where somebody would say, try to resolve this issue, can you get involved? And I suppose some of the mediation things came in at the time. I've been a mediator for 20 odd years, but it was just helping people to just have those conversations. And usually over a coffee, it would be, right, we've resolved the issue, but the HR person would also have a bit of coaching and things, and they'd remember that whole process the next time that they had issues. So it was almost an informal process, and only if I couldn't resolve it informally would it then go to the formal process, and that was done in parallel with the trade union. So I'm not saying that exact process would fit with every organisation, but what I am saying is that discussion about how do you take out that wasted time of note taking, etc., when you don't need it. And I'll come on to disciplinaries as well, because other than gross misconduct, I think a lot of this applies to disciplinaries as well. So I'm just going to move on, and I'll look at the chat at the end, see if we've got any more questions. Let me just get the technology working. Time, right, we've just gone 2:30. Right, nice picture of a tree. As I said earlier, I love talking about root cause. So root cause is dead simple. There's lots of complex ways of thinking about it, but the 5 whys is, for me, the most simple way. And kids are brilliant at this. Keep asking why until you exhaust the whole process. And I'll come on later about dealing with the what rather than the why, which is what I think a lot of organisations do. My view of root cause when it comes to workplace issues is this. And this is something I use with lawyers and various people. It's only Pete Colby's view. It's not It's not an exact science, but my view is that leadership capability is the root of every workplace issue that I've ever seen and I ever will see. Some of my lawyer friends don't agree with me because they talk about toxic employees, but my view is, well, if we give leaders the capability to deal with those toxic employees, then we won't have the issue. So it always comes back to leadership capability, and it's not their fault. It's not because they're bad people, but it's a lot of this stuff around the support we give them, helping them to sort grievances out, helping them to see accountability, the HR support, the risk aversion or not, and various things, and employee engagement and things. But that's my view on the root cause of all the issues that I see. So difficult employees, that's something that a lot of people talk to me about how do you deal with toxic employees, difficult employees, and things like that. So just to give you an example, I want to talk to you about, I've called her Poison Ivy here. Her name was actually Jean, but she looked this is not her, but she did look very much like this, about as happy as this lady looked. And this is when I was factory manager at Port Farms, and I used to walk the lines and, speaking to people and things. And this lady, Jean, she always did what she's doing now. She looked away from me and totally ignored me every time I said good morning or good afternoon, whatever it may be. And I was actually to the extent of wondering, I'm wondering if I'm putting her in a difficult situation, because I wondered if she was deaf or she couldn't speak or something. So I spoke to her local union rep, a guy called Daryl. And I said to him, look, Daryl, there's a lady on the line that I think I might be making her feel uncomfortable, because I keep saying hello and she just turns away and ignores me. And I described her and he said, oh, that's Jean. It's all right now, she's fine. She just hates management. I'm like, okay, fair enough, she just hates management. And I'm like, well, why? And he said, well, she's just very, very frustrated. So I said to Daryl, look, he knew what I was like, and I'm a big believer in, you don't have to be best friends with people at work, but you do have to pay them the level of respect as a human being. And I don't mean for the position I was in, I mean as a fellow human being, just a level of courtesy. That's what all employees should give to everybody. So I said to her, look, well, if she keeps being like that, that I will be talking to her, and she won't work for the company for long if that's how she treats people. So just letting somebody else into the waiting room. So Daryl had a quick word in her ear, and because he knew what I would do if she kept ignoring me. So she then started to at least face me. And because Daryl had a word, she started to grunt. So if I said good morning, she would grunt. And eventually that moved on to her actually speaking and saying good morning and various things. And that conversation over a period of weeks and probably into a couple of months developed into her telling me why she hated management and why she was so frustrated. And she started telling me a lot of the engagement surveys that had come out and the ideas she'd put in and the promises that she'd had that they'd get fixed. And again, it was at toilet, canteen, car park, locker type level. And they just weren't done. So she decided that all managers are useless. So she didn't talk to anyone. So as she was telling me some of these things, in the background, I was just making sure that some of these things were done. And one day she said to me, I noticed that I mentioned to you about whatever it was, toilets or whatever, and they're done. Have you had anything to do with that? And I went, well, I might have done. But she then started to engage because she realized that I was somebody that valued what was important to her. And I would tell her if I couldn't do something. But if I told her that I would, I did it. And so she started to really engage. And just to cut a long story short, she became an absolute superstar for me. So going from what I thought was initially a toxic employee, who probably I would have ended up having to exit the business because I won't accept that type of behavior. Through conversations, she became an absolute star. So this STEPS thing, a lot of you will have 5S programs in your organization. And STEPS, sorry, somebody else just entered. STEPS was our equivalent of 5S, and Jean was part of that process that came up with it. So that stood for sort, tidy, examine, perfect, sustain. And it was just a workplace organisation program. But she was a STEPS champion. She wore her STEPS t-shirt with pride. She never changed that expression. She always stayed grumpy. But her grumpiness turned from management to her colleagues who weren't tidying up, who weren't cleaning their workplace, who were leaving early, who were not doing what the customer needed, etc. She did my job for me. She was absolutely brilliant, alongside lots of other people as well. And some of the, I've just listed some of the things. So BRC is the British Retail Consortium, and you know, you'll all know how important food is from an auditing and a health and safety perspective. And we got amazing audit results and various other things, customer deliveries, etc., through people like Jean. And it was absolutely fantastic. And clearly it made a very, very, a very happy Pete Colby in that role as factory manager. But just through talking to people, and I always say to HR people, whoever your most obnoxious people are, whoever your most difficult people are, talk to them more, because they're probably really frustrated. They're either toxic, in which case we need to help people get them out of the business, but most people are not toxic. They're just frustrated. They're angry, or they're not led properly, and proper conversations can deal with that. So, discipline. If I get time, I'll tell you about this guy who's talked about prison and things, but I might not get time on this this webinar. But discipline, I think, is another area where we can do a lot more in an informal way. Don't get me wrong, gross misconduct, absolutely. You don't deal with that informally, obviously. But the amount of time I've seen people go through processes and hours and hours and weeks and weeks and months, and it's a verbal warning or it's a written warning. You're like, well, you know, what did you do informally? What did you do to try and correct that behaviour? And that's why I want to talk about the what and the why. So I'm a believer that alongside root cause and 5 whys is the results we get are the results we get. But to change those, we need to change people's behaviours. And to change those behaviours, you've got to change people's thinking. You're never going to change behaviour without thinking. And this, insights is the really key thing for me in when we've got disciplinary things, because we all know that disciplinary is about changing behaviours. That's what it's about. So just to give you an example, and this was in Rolls-Royce, we had an issue on a site where I had a number of, the HR manager worked for me, and she worked alongside the health and safety manager. And we had an issue. We had a small fire because people were not smoking in the smoking shelters. It was in a corner of a building outside where some litter had gathered, and that fire burnt. It got put out, but it was quite close to some gas bottles, and we all know what would have happened if those gas bottles had gone up. And we had an issue with people complying to wearing safety glasses. So when I asked the HR manager and the safety manager, what are you doing about that? They said, disciplinary. We've got posters up. People know that it's a disciplinary offence. Right, well, okay, you've got that. Now you've had these incidents, especially this one. What are you doing about that now? And the answer was, we're putting even more posters up. We're putting them in bigger letters. We're putting it bold. You will be disciplined if you don't do this. And for me, that was dealing with the what and not the why. So I'm going to show you a video now, which is a video that I then went onto that site to show the whole workforce. I went across 3 shifts because we had an issue. We had a fire because somebody was smoking in the wrong place and some litter had caught fire. Now, just before this presentation, I tested this video and the sound didn't work. So what I'm going to try and do, the first bit of the video doesn't have sound where there's writing anyway. But then I'm going to try and sync my phone to the sound, so hopefully that will work. So just watch this video. It's only 3 minutes, but this was me trying to say to the workforce about why they need to smoke in smoking shelters and why they shouldn't be smoking in unauthorised areas. Was my attempt at just standing in the front of the workforce and explaining why. So we don't ask people to smoke in the smoking shelters for a reason other than their safety. And yes, it's a disciplinary offence if you don't. Yes, you could lose your job if you don't. But more importantly, 56 people on that example didn't go home to their family, just going to watch a football match. And a lot of the younger people in the audience, I mean, I remember that very well because I'm an old person, but a lot of the younger people thought that was staged and it was a film. And when I explained to them that was live on ITV, people watching that football match and watched people die on ITV all within 10 minutes because somebody smoked and dropped a fag on some litter and it went up. Now, in that example, in that site in Rolls-Royce, it could have been a number of gas bottles that had gone off as major explosions in that factory. So we could have had multiple fatalities. And then I asked the question, does anybody now not understand why they should smoke in smoking shelters? And I asked the question, does anybody not understand that if they keep not doing that, they will not be employed by the company anymore? And everybody said they understood. And don't get me wrong, it got better for a while and then you've got to do more things, but that why rather than the what. Now, the other issue was safety glasses, and we had a number of issues as regards people wearing safety glasses. Now, I've got a video on that, but I'm not going to show it because I showed it to a group of health and safety professionals last week, and they said it made them feel too sick. So I'm not going to show you it, but I am going to show you a photo from it. So it's a warning that's not a very pleasant photo, but if you think about the context on this, and I did show the video to the workforce because they wouldn't wear safety glasses. The video was of a guy having, well, actually, I assume it was a guy. It might have been a lady. I don't know. I can't tell from eyes. But that is a metal shard from a machine that's been cutting metal that's flown into that person's eye. Now, the video was somebody trying to take that out with sort of tweezers, couldn't get it out, and then they burred it out. They had one of those like little, it was a medical one, but one of those little drill bits, and they drilled it out, and it really made people feel sick. Now, I got a lot of complaints from that video because people felt sick. But again, I asked the question, does anybody not know why they have to wear safety glasses? And those who felt well enough to answer said, yeah, they do. And again, I asked the question, does anybody not understand that if you don't wear safety glasses, you will lose your job eventually for your own safety? And they all said they understood why. And again, you know, it improves for a period of time, starts to waver off, and you do it again. You do the engagement again. So we don't need to go through formal disciplinaries with everybody who's not wearing safety glasses. That probably saved, I don't know, 50 conversations or 50 formal, you know, things that were going to end up in a verbal warning or something. It's just not worth it in my view. It's really deal with the why. So after that, I thought I'll show a picture of a cute puppy because that's much more appealing. And this is my last point. One of the key things, and Tanya touched on this yesterday in a presentation about mediation, is talking, but actually listening and listening to understand. So in my book, we've got 3 levels of understanding or 3 levels of listening. There's that level where hopefully none of you are at the moment, I don't know, but where you're just not listening at all. And somebody asks you a question, what do you think? And you're like, oh, can you repeat the question, please? Because you've been thinking about what you're doing tonight or what you're having for tea, etc. The more common, especially in disputes, is that you are listening, but you're listening for a gap. You're listening for somebody to take a breath so that you can tell them why they're wrong, or you're building up your story, and we all do it. You're building up your story so that when they pause, you'll tell them your story, and you're not really listening. And if we can get to talk to people in an informal way and do this, listen to understand, park our own views, park our preconceptions, and just understand what their issue is, guarantee it, you'll resolve 99%, if not 100% of the issues. And if you don't, it's probably one of those irrational employees that just wants to go down a formal process, fine. But 99%, you will have a solution. So, final slide, I'll move out of the way. If anybody wants my contact details or details about what we do or mobile number or et cetera, if you're not linked in with me on LinkedIn, then drop us a LinkedIn connection, that'd be good. And then we've got 6 minutes to see if there are any more questions. Now, I do apologize because I'm juggling all this on my own, so I can't read all the things yet. But please feel free to unmute yourself if you've got a burning question.
Hi, it's Lindsay Green. I've got a question.
Hello, Lindsay. How are you?
Hello, I'm very well, thank you. I'm listening with interest. We have a situation at the moment where we have a grievance that was raised. We've dealt with it in a very friendly and reasonable manner, I would say. However, now we need to try and get the employee back into work. And she's flatly refusing to A, come back into work, B, have any form of face-to-face contact with anybody from work. She won't meet me for a coffee. She won't, I can't go to her house. She can come to me. She can, I've literally offered everything. I've offered mediation. I've offered to get in touch with mediation, just to talk to a mediator over the phone. Nothing. We're now at the point where she's going to tribunal, or potentially going to tribunal. And quite honestly, I'm exhausted by the fact that the only communication that she will use is email.
Yeah.
It frustrates me because I'm a person who I enjoy speaking to people face to face. I think we get the best benefit from face to face. And you can never always put your compassion or into an email, no matter how hard you try, especially without while still trying to not admit liability or anything, when you're trying not to trip yourself up on an email. A conversation I much prefer. What would be your suggestions in these instances? It's the first one I've ever encountered where she refuses to engage.
Yeah, I mean, when you say she's going to tribunal, I mean, I'm not sure what she's taking you for, because presumably she's still employed, so it's not constructive. But whatever.
She's resigned currently, so we're just awaiting her notice, and then her ET1, I'm assuming, will arrive. So
she's taking you for constructive, yeah?
Yeah, I would imagine. We've only had it sort of informally through the lawyer.
Well, I mean, the first thing I'd say on constructive is we all know it's notoriously hard to win for an employee anyway, and a lot of the things you've done will help to demonstrate that you've tried to sort that, because tribunals are all about fairness and justice, and so she'll do well to win it. But what I would say is, in that type of situation, because if you can't get to the why as regards why she won't talk to you or whatever, there might be some barrier there that you can't find out about until she does talk to you. So it's almost a chicken and egg type situation. Sometimes the whole without prejudice conversation can help them, because it is, the way I describe without prejudice to people is it never happened. And sometimes if you can get that, maybe explain that to her by email because she wants to, and I assume she's taking some sort of advice, then you would hope that might be another way to have that conversation. Because I mean, mediation's all without prejudice, but it's, it might be mediation that's scaring her off, because sometimes when people don't understand it, they don't always engage with mediation because it scares them. But actually, if you can just say, we just want to have a without prejudice conversation, because you're in dispute, because you're taking to tribunal, so you can have a without prejudice conversation and explain how it's done and how it works. And then she's talking to her advisor, and they hopefully would be saying, yeah, you've got nothing to lose by having a without prejudice conversation. Maybe that might be a way to do it.
Sadly, I think it's the advisor that's stopping her from having the conversations, but I don't know. But we'll keep on as much as possible.
Sorry, I've got one of those at the moment where, unfortunately, the lady's seeing a no-win, no-fee lawyer, and he's telling her she's going to get a year's salary. And they don't help advisors like that, because she's not going to get a year's salary. But there's only, you know, you can only do what you can do. And it sounds like you've looked at every possibility, but does she really understand what a without prejudice conversation is? And, you know, does she need to take some secondary advice or whatever? Is there somebody in the organisation she trusts? You know, I'm happy to, if you want to give me a call, you know, after this, happy to talk to you about it in a bit more detail, because there might be a few different avenues. But sometimes, you know, when I say grievances are sometimes down to the irrational person, sometimes people just, often on the back of some poor advice, are completely irrational.
Yeah, absolutely. And I've just noticed the comment from a lady already that about meeting us with ACAS, that there's literally, you know, the only thing that I can hope for is that when it gets to conciliation, we're able to get to some kind of situation or to resolve it, but I don't know at this stage. So
yeah, and with ACAS, it depends.
You just spend your life, don't you, though, just wondering what you could have done differently.
You can, and you know, if her preferred thing is email, and you're offering every single thing that you can offer, so when it comes to tribunal, you know, and they're asking, did you do everything you can to, I mean, I assume she's gone through a grievance process and all that stuff. But, you know, if you're demonstrating that you've been reasonable, I wouldn't be too worried about the risk in the tribunal, especially for conflict.
Thank you.
Good. Right. Just look at the clock. It's 1 minute to. Any last question? But yeah, do give us a ring afterwards if you want to talk about that. Okay. So thank you very much. I'll bring it to a close. And thanks again to Liz from the HR Ninjas for arranging this. Really, really excellent set of webinars, and hopefully everyone's finding it useful. Take care. See you later.